compared to what's happening.
What if I told you that right now, as you're listening to this, all possible futures are converging into one inevitable timeline?
I just watched a video of a man basically saying that the release of those documents is quite literally an elaborate stress test on us, the world.
The Epstein files just keep getting stranger. In these emails, he discusses giving people supernatural abilities through psychological stress, cloning people, and even designer babies, whatever that's supposed to mean. Let's start at the bottom here. This person named Gino Yu emails Epstein. He says, I'm in Paris and was about to write you in a... Popped up. She's a classic state
president, but with the powers of law enforcement, which is very dangerous and very scary. I want to review some important developments. I'm Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice.
I want to explain something from a photographer's perspective. So I'm a professional photographer. I spent about 2 years working in showbiz. And in that time, I spent a lot of time around famous people. We're talking some mid-tier, but a lot of A-listers. Your mom, your grandma knows who these people are. We're talking globally famous people. Just to kind of put it into perspective, I mean, I never went on tour with a celebrity. I've never shot like the Grammys or anything like that. In terms of the photographers that have been around celebrities, I was on the low end. But I did spend enough time around famous people that towards the end, I started to get, comfortable and pretty relaxed around. You basically would have to be my hero for me to freak out about being around a famous person. I really wasn't nervous about it anymore. As a photographer that was taking photos, getting paid to take photos of famous people, I learned something. And yes, this is Mick Jagger, by the way. I learned that for normal people, photography is a luxury and it's amazing. People get gussied up and they kind of love it. For celebrities, it's a little bit of a nuisance. It's half awesome, half they hate it. In other words, they do want candid photos of them with other famous people, especially if they're on the coming up and things like that. But it's also this thing where they want you to be efficient. They want you to get the shot and disappear. You are wallflowers. You are nobody, right? I mean, literally there was one time where I was in a green room with 3 A-list celebrities and it's just me. I'm the only non-famous person in this room and I'm trying to be on the other side of the room trying to act like I'm not there. And, there's this weird delicate dance you have to do where they do the same thing everybody else does. They have a sixth sense for when the camera is on them and they start laughing, ho, 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 and they start, whatever. And then they kind of give you this weird look of all right, man, did you get the shot? Because I want to get back to being normal, right? The reason why I'm saying that is that for whose job it was to take pictures of famous people, I cannot fathom being able to just casually go around. By the way, this is Ghislaine. So people that think that Ghislaine is the one doing it, she's in the photo. The idea that you can just casually snap pictures all the time with the flash on, just all the time in every possible, oh, you're eating, we're going to take a picture. Basically paparazzi, but all the time. Oh, you're with children, we're taking a photo. Oh, you're doing whatever you're doing, there is a photographer there snapping pictures. I cannot fathom this. When I was taking photos of famous people, it was literally you are in, you are out. It is so nerve-wracking with some of these people where you basically get 2 shots. If you're doing a group shot, you get one, oh, let me get one more just in case, click, and then they already are looking at you like you're an idiot, right? It is inconceivable that I could, as a photographer, just stand there and just start snapping pictures of people with their eyes closed about to eat. In other words, what I'm saying is that the numbers of photos that exist alone is incriminating. The fact that these photos even exist is incriminating. The fact that they were comfortable with the idea of that, oh yeah, I'm gonna be here and people are gonna just document every single thing I do, that is incriminating.
There's something really interesting in those files. In October of 2011, Jeffrey met Chris Poole, the creator of 4chan. The day after that meeting, Chris decides to relaunch the Poll message board. It stands for politically incorrect. Now, if you're not chronically online and lucky enough to have never heard of this message board, good for you. It is a cesspool of garbage. It is also hugely culturally significant, and there is a direct pipeline from that message board to where we are now. Now, it turns out that Jeffrey apparently was a huge gamer and loved 4chan, but there's another key player in this story, and that is Steve Bannon. Their connection and their now established connection to 4chan makes a lot more sense. Because Steve Bannon was the architect and the mastermind behind weaponizing an army of incel alt-right trolls, the same trolls that helped meme the Orange Clown into the presidency. This army largely mobilized after Gamergate. If you don't know what Gamergate is, I made a whole in-depth video about it. Go look it up. Anyways, this army of angry young nerds was basically used and manipulated by Steve Bannon to create a cultural wave of anti-left memes and propaganda, railing against wokeness, feminism, whatever. This army became more and more political, more and more alt-right, and way more conspiratorial, culminating in the Pizzagate conspiracy. Pizzagate was very interestingly timed because it basically exploded weeks before the November 2016 election. And where did Pizzagate get its start? Yes, you're right, on the poll message board. Now, Pizzagate basically fueled the myth that the Orange Clown was this billionaire white knight sent to battle the evil deep state. There was this demonic cabal of A-listers and government elites and billionaires who were basically part of a PDF ring. Hillary Clinton, according to Pizzagate, was one of the ringleaders. And guess who won that election? Now, right after Pizzagate, in 2017, we got the very first QAnon drop. Where, you might ask? On the poll message board. Now, we don't need to get into what QAnon is. You know what it is. But basically, when you boil it down, it was pretty much an extraordinary psychological tool to keep a cult in line. And that cult is MAGA. Now, there's not that many people that talk about QAnon today, but basically every single stupid conspiracy theory that you hear MAGA repeat over and over again today, it has its seeds in QAnon. January 6th, for example, was the direct result of QAnon. Now, if you think this is the first and last time that a conservative political group created an insane satanic panic as a smokescreen to prevent investigations into themselves, you're wrong. Because as it turns out, according to these files, there was absolutely a group of elite government officials and billionaires doing very bad things on an island. Now, if you wanted to deflect from a lot of bad things that a lot of very powerful people were doing, and you wanted to install a very heavily blackmailed puppet who would do whatever you say to make sure that his evil deeds don't come to light, if you were a foreign government with direct ties to a financier named Jeffrey, and Jeffrey has a meeting with the dude who created 4chan, well, let's just say you have created the most successful 15-year brainwashing campaign the world has ever seen.
បងប្រាប់ពីវិធីក្នុងការប្រើវីតាមីនមុខយិនសិនវីតាមីនមុខហ្នឹងគឺប្រើជាអ្នកគ្នាយើងអាចលាបស្រោមហើយដាក់ moisturizer គ្រីមយិនសិនតិចតិចមកចាំយើងបត់បាក់ជាមួយនឹងវីតាមីនមុខនៅកន្លែងណាមានស្នាមមុនជាប់អាចរួចខ្លាំងហើយយើងដាក់វាបើយើងចង់លាបសពពេញមុខក៏បានដែរយើងបន្តវាដាក់ស្រាលលាបឲ្យសពពេញមុខឲ្យស្រាលមកអ្នកគ្នាអានេះជួយបានផលលឿនខ្លាំងគុណនឹង18ដងនៃការដែលយើងប្រើ skin care ធម្មតាវាមានផ្ទុក retinol 0.1% active ingredient ដែលជួយជំរុញដល់ការព្យាបាលស្បែកមុខប្រើតាមអាទិត្យអ្នកគ្នាស្បែកមុខសោកខ្ចីហើយ smooth ម៉ាត់ហ្មងណាអ្នកមានបញ្ហាខ្លាំងប្រើរាល់ថ្ងៃអ្នកអត់សូវមានបញ្ហាអីទេមួយអាទិត្យប្រើតែ4ដងអីបានហើយ
Our relationship with Pakistan is very, very complicated. I've always maintained that there are two separate Pakistani intelligence services. I mean, there aren't. It's one, ISI. But in reality, it's two. On the one hand, you have a whole bunch of guys who were all trained at Sandhurst, the British military academy. They all speak English like you and I do. They love the United States. Many of them vacation here. They want their kids to go to school in the United States. And they would do literally anything for the CIA. They were the only ones that would do our operations without wearing bulletproof vests. And then there are the other guys with the long beards and the short shalwar kameez, giving you the stink eye, putting bin Laden up in Abbottabad. Right in the middle of West Point, shooting at Westerners and not doing follow-up investigations when other people shoot at Westerners. Two very, very different strains inside that intelligence service. And I'll add another thing. It's not even that clear-cut as to who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. Look at the Taliban. The word Taliban is the plural of the word Talib. Talib in both Pashto and Arabic means student, right? So Taliban is students, plural. In the 1990s, the early 1990s, Pakistani trucks on their way from Pakistan to Iran were getting hijacked in Afghanistan because it was chaos in Afghanistan, right? Nobody was in charge. It was just a big mess. And so Benazir Bhutto, who was the pro-American prime minister of Pakistan, said, we're going to do something about all these truck hijackings. We need to protect the trucks. I have an idea, she says. Why don't we go to the madrasas, the religious schools in Pakistan? We'll take these Afghan Taliban, the Afghan students who are studying, they ran away from Afghanistan. We'll take these Taliban out of the madrasas and we'll have them sit in the trucks with the truck drivers. So if somebody tries to hijack the truck, they can protect the cargo and the driver. So they started doing that. And that made it easier. Trucks weren't getting hijacked. And then she said, you know what might even be better is if we take these Taliban and we put them in villages all along the truck routes. That way they don't have to drive back and forth and back and forth, and they can just protect the trucks along the routes. And then we'll give them weapons and money so they can protect themselves. And the next thing you know, she created the fucking Taliban. And then she lost control of it, and it took the whole country. And then it let Al-Qaeda come in. And the rest is history. It was an accident. It was poor policy planning. And we're still paying the price. I will admit to a bias that I have too. You know, I read the Washington Post every day, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I read all the big papers because I have a radio show every day and you have to be informed. And every day I see these op-eds and editorials like, oh my God, the plight of Afghan women. Oh my God, the girls can't go to school and the women are veiled. No, they chose that. The Taliban didn't come from outer space and land in Afghanistan. These are the fathers and sons and cousins and nephews and children of all these oppressed Afghan women. They had 20 years to decide what they wanted. And this is what they decided. So why don't we just walk away? This was their decision. That's it.
Yeah. I guess we could just try to shove democracy down their throats, right?
Exactly. When they've never asked for it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to take a restaurant owner from Baltimore and make him the president of Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, your first day in Pakistan, what was the job description and how did you get started?
Well, there was no job description. There hadn't been a chief of counterterrorism operations there, which just flabbergasted me.
Here's the thing about the Epstein files that just dropped. 3 million pages. You're going to see a lot of names. Elon Musk, Peter Attia, Deepak Chopra, Steve Bannon, the list goes on. But everyone is asking the wrong question. The question isn't just what did they say to Epstein? The question is, what did they already know when they said it? Let's establish a timeline. 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida begin investigating Epstein after a parent reports that he sexually abused her 14-year-old daughter. 2006, Epstein is arrested. A grand jury indicts him on soliciting prostitution. The FBI opens a federal investigation that identifies 36 girls, some as young as 14, whom Epstein had allegedly abused. June 2008, Epstein pleads guilty to procuring a child for prostitution and soliciting a minor. He's sentenced to 18 months. He registers as a sex offender. This was not a secret. It was public record. It was in the news. So, by mid-2008, if you were a person of any means or sophistication in America, and certainly if you ran in elite circles, you knew Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender who abused underage girls. Now let's look at the emails. Elon Musk, The emails start in late 2012, 4 years after the conviction. Musk writes to Epstein that they had a very enjoyable conversation. They discuss visiting Epstein's island over Christmas. Musk asks, and I quote, "What day night will be the wildest party on your island?" In 2013, he's emailing about helicopter transport to the island, asking when he should head to your island. This wasn't ignorance. By 2012, everyone knew. Peter Attia, the longevity guru, just hired by CBS News. Over 1,700 mentions in the files. Emails spanning from at least 2015 to 2018. In June 2015, 7 years after the conviction, Attia gushes that the worst part about being Epstein's friend is that the life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I can't tell a soul. He knew the life was outrageous. He just couldn't tell anyone. In 2016, Attia sends Epstein a joke about, you know what, I'm not even going to repeat it. You can look it up. And then in December 2018, after the Miami Herald published its devastating investigation identifying 80 of Epstein's victims, Attia emails Epstein asking if there's any legal fallout from the story. Not expressing horror, not distancing himself, checking in on a buddy's legal situation. Deepak Chopra, the spiritual guru, the self-help icon, the guy selling you enlightenment, emails spanning 2016 through at least 2018. In November 2016, Epstein shares a news article about one of his accusers dropping a lawsuit. Chopra asks, "Did she also drop the civil case against you?" Epstein replies, "Yup." Chopra responds, "Good. Good." Steve Bannon, hundreds of friendly texts months before Epstein's death. They discuss politics, travel, and a documentary that Bannon was planning so that he could help salvage Epstein's reputation. In March 2019, Bannon asked if Epstein could supply his plane to pick him up in Rome. This was in 2009. This was 2019. So here's the point. The question isn't whether these people committed crimes. That's for investigators to determine. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they just had lunch. Maybe they just talked about meditation or solar panels or longevity science. But here's what we know they did. They chose to associate. They chose to buddy up. They chose to email about wild parties and outrageous lifestyles with a man they knew, because everyone knew, had pled guilty to crimes against children. And that raises a different question, not a legal one, a moral one. Where do we draw the line? I'm not saying these people should go to jail for exchanging emails. I'm asking, why do we keep buying their cars? Why do we keep listening to their podcasts? Why do we keep paying $2,500 for their longevity programs? Why do we keep treating them like gurus and visionaries and people whose wisdom is worth following? Deepak Chopra has made a career telling you how to live a more conscious, more ethical, more enlightened life. And when his friend's accuser dropped the lawsuit, he said, "Good." Peter Attia is selling you the science of living longer. He couldn't stop himself from befriending a convicted child sex offender. These are the people we elevate. These are the people we venerate. These are the people we give platforms to and listen to and hand over our money and attention. And look, the legal system will do what the legal system does, but the legal system is not the only place where accountability happens. The market is a place where accountability happens. Culture is a place where accountability happens. Your choices about who deserves your attention, your money, your trust, that's accountability too. So maybe the takeaway from these 3 million pages isn't a client list. Maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's this. Stop making heroes out of people who couldn't draw a basic moral line. Stop taking life advice from people who thought a convicted child sex offender was a suitable friend. Stop buying the supplements. Stop listening to the podcast. Stop pretending that wealth or fame or the appearance of wisdom means something or someone has actual integrity. Because if you're sending chummy emails about wild parties to a registered sex offender in 2012, 2015, 2018, you don't get to be a guru. You don't get to be a visionary. You don't get to tell anyone how to live. You knew. And you stayed.
I kind of think I'm seeing a new world order come together. I actually think this case is the end of the old world order. And one of the biggest questions is, where will Europe fall? Here you see these countries that used to shun China. Now it looks like they're trying to do trade deals. This is Keir Starmer, the leader of the UK. Mark Carney is this guy who used to be head of the Bank of England. Now he's the leader of Canada. He's trying to do deals with China. Xi Jinping is saying that the renminbi, which is China's currency, should be the reserve currency. You have The Economist saying China is winning the trade war. This is a publication out of the UK. And the BBC, which honestly is a propaganda outlet for the British Empire, has completely changed their tone all of a sudden on China.
of electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines, electric batteries. China makes more robots than anywhere else in the world. China has and processes more rare earths than anywhere else in the world, about 90% of rare earths, for instance. And these are the kind of extracts, these minerals that are needed to make anything from an electric vehicle to your smartphone to Bluetooth speakers. So
honestly, what I'm seeing here is that while the U.S. taxpayer used to subsidize European welfare states, maybe somebody else is going to be picking up the bill. It's a big bill. Lifetime entitlement to unemployment just ended in Belgium. In France, they raised the retirement age to 64, and people just went bananas. They ultimately had to reverse the law and take it back down to 62. And now 65-year-old retirees in France have higher wages than the average working adult, which to me just goes to show you when China's talking up an EU trade deal and they have this huge commitment to all these pensions and social programs, Europe says they're going to go on this big military spending spree. So where are you going to get the money? Are you going to do this again? I don't think so. I don't think the people in Europe are going to tolerate that. Moreover, you have a shrinking population. Do you think the young people of France or Germany are going to be willing to be in the military in the same way that this would have happened in the past? I don't think so, even if they're there. Europe isn't making very much stuff anymore. So the deal here that China is basically proposing is, why don't you just let us make all the stuff? We'll kind of do globalism, just minus America. But I'm not so sure. There's a problem, which is that Europeans just don't consume that much. And China has a lot of stuff that needs to get consumed. Americans, we're the ones who consume. And the reason that's important is that ever since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, which is basically a project that Bill Clinton put together, here's Clinton with Mr. Jeff, the main engine of globalism has been these guys here selling to Americans. And honestly, when you think about who this whole globalism thing was really benefiting, it's a lot of these international people, these Davos men. Here's Jeffrey Epstein donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Council on Foreign Relations so he could get on the board. Apparently he loved Davos. He loved the World Economic Forum. His friend Bill Clinton loved it too. Larry Summers loves it. This is a guy that was associated with Jeff too, former president of Harvard. He was the former Treasury Secretary. And what this world did of the old globalism stuff is that it turned Americans mostly into salespeople and marketers. You can see here that for a long time, every dollar spent on marketing returned between $13 and $25. We basically found that if we just let these guys make everything and we added a huge markup to it with packaging and marketing and branding, that U.S. consumers would just buy it at huge prices, inflate corporate profits, and make it possible for people like this to exist, just in all that world of banking and international finance and Davos. And now there's this huge scandal erupting in Britain where Jeff was friends with Lord Mandelson, who was a high-level government guy who was giving secrets to Jeff. Here's Lord Mandelson here, the guy. In the Clinton years, he was Secretary of Trade and Industry. So basically all this international business stuff, international trade, Davos, import, exports. He even wrote an article for the Center for American Progress, a Democrat outlet, talking about the future of globalization, how it can work for all of us. But globalization was more about these Harvard people, Bill, Jeff, big taxpayer subsidies to Europe, super nice lifestyle in Europe. And then Trump goes into the World Economic Forum and says, quote, in recent decades, it became conventional wisdom in Washington and European capitals that the only way to grow a modern Western economy was through ever-increasing government spending, unchecked mass migration, and endless foreign imports. He's basically saying this is done. Where is he focusing? He's focusing on a prosperous future for the Middle East. But it's not just the Middle East. Here is Argentinian leader Javier Milei launching an initiative to boost Israel-Latin America ties. In fact, it looks like we are planning a semiconductor supply chain future that involves Latin America. We're trying to make Latin America into a place where manufacturing and consumption grows. That's why Trump is ordering the Pentagon to do whatever it takes to clean it up. So then you see that Europe scrambles and tries to make a trade pact with South America. But the problem is farmers are getting all these cushy subsidies because it's Europe. So the French farmers protest, the Irish farmers protest. The Greek farmers protest. That's what I'm saying. Protest, protest, protest. And I'm telling you, they're going to get what they want. There is no appetite in Europe to change this lifestyle. So I think the new American coalition is not just the Americas. I also think it's a lot of these Middle Eastern countries that are involved in the Abraham Accords. Not just Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Morocco, UAE. And wherever the new goods come for this new coalition, I don't think it's going to be as much from China. Here you see U.S. manufacturing expanding the most since 2022. I think China's going to find alignment with Africa. But the people who are lost in this shuffle are the people of Europe. Jeff's downfall was about more than just the scandal. It's honestly kind of the end of the era of the European elite profiting off of the globalist system.
According to court documents, and I have to say allegedly, but according to the documents, at least 2 of Epstein's victims tried to leave that island. One was this young girl, she was 15 at the time, named Sarah Ransom, tried to go into the ocean and swim to safety, probably to St. Thomas, because that's the nearest island. They sent out a search party and they found her and they brought her back to the island. Another woman who was essayed inside the house, inside the compound, snuck out of Jeffrey's house and was somewhere on the island, and he sent out his cohorts who looked with flashlights at night and found her and brought her back to the house. So at least 2 of his victims tried to escape. They not only victimized, trafficked, and abused, but they were also being held captive wherever Jeffrey Epstein was. These girls were not just allowed to walk out of the front door and leave. And I know a lot of people say, why didn't they just leave? If they were being flown to places like the Epstein Island, Little St. James, they can't just walk off the island and go where? So yes, that did happen. And I'm sure that there's many more that just didn't tell their story, but we know of at least 2.
សម្រាប់ Les Sochi ឥឡូវកាន់តែពិសេសហើយបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាលាបបានស្បែកសស្បែកស្អាតនិងទទួលបានទឹកប្រាក់ចំនួន 2222 ហើយបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាទទួលបានរង្វាន់ឬក៏ទទួលបានស្បែកស្អាតហើយកុំភ្លេចបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាសម្បកកំប៉ុងក៏មានអត្ថប្រយោជន៍ដែរបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាកុំបោះចោលសម្បកកំប៉ុង Les Sochi 50កំប៉ុងបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នានឹងទទួលបានមាសចំនួន 5 ហ៊ុន ត្រឡប់ទៅវិញបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាកុំភ្លេចកុំបោះចោលឲ្យសោះហើយបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាដែលចូលចិត្តប្រើ brand Sochi ជាឈុតគឺមាន scrap មានប្រេងហើយជាមួយនឹងលេសម្រាប់បងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាចង់បានមាសមួយជីត្រូវទេបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នារក្សាទុកសម្បកកំប៉ុង 50កំប៉ុង scrap 30 ប្រេង 30 បងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាអាចយកមកដូរបានគឺទទួលបានមាសចំនួន 1G បងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាអត់ស្ដាប់ច្រឡំទេបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាមានកំប៉ុងគឺអាចយកមកដូរជាមួយនឹងក្រុមហ៊ុនបានអញ្ចឹង promotion នេះគឺធ្វើសម្រាប់ជូនអតិថិជនលើកទឹកចិត្តអតិថិជនដែលគាត់បានប្រើប្រាស់ brand Sochi ជាមួយនឹង Les Sochi អញ្ចឹង promotion នេះគឺពួកយើងធ្វើរហូតដល់អស់មាសចំនួន 20 រង្វាន់នេះប៉ុន្តែបើសិនជាមានអតិថិជនគ្រប់គ្រងកាន់តែច្រើនកាន់តែខ្លាំងពួកយើងនឹងបន្ត promotion នេះបន្ថែមទៀតអញ្ចឹងបងប្អូនទាំងគ្នាប្រញាប់រុះរាន់ទិញ Les Sochi យកទៅប្រើប្រាស់អ្នកដែលទិញ Les Sochi ហើយសូមទៅត្រឡប់ទៅរកមើលកំប៉ុងខ្លួនឯងរក្សាទុកកំប៉ុងខ្លួនឯងឲ្យបានស្រួលរក្សាទុកសម្រាប់ដូរយកជាមាសបងប្អូនទាំងគ្នាកំប៉ុង Les Sochi ពណ៌មាសគឺយើងអាចដូរយកមាសមែនតែនបាន ថ្លៃណាឥឡូវ 500 ជាងបងប្អូនទាំងគ្នាក្នុងមួយជីអញ្ចឹងបងប្អូនទាំងគ្នាចង់បានមាសយកទៅប្រើអត់នេះគឺជាមាសហើយនេះយើងដាក់ជាមួយនឹង brand Sochi តែម្ដង
The old world is dying and the new one struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. The global order that has existed since the end of World War II has been one of easy travel and trade between NATO nations. It has been one of mutually assured destruction, preventing global conflict between large powers. And what we've seen is that this system has led to an immense change in everyone's quality of life, but it has led to an immense change in everyone's modes of living. And those changes in people's modes of living are leading to the frustrations that we feel now and leading to this old world dying. At least I think so. Our interactions are far less human than they used to be. The rise of giant tech companies ensures that we never have to really interact with our peers to do anything, to see a movie, to order food, to go to the grocery store. We don't have to leave our houses if we don't want to. And this has left us isolated and lonely. The rise of suburbanization has ensured that we spend more time by ourselves in our cars rather than on buses or trains. And public transportation is simply impossible to manage in many communities around the United States. Even activity that required social organization, like participating in religious groups or hanging out with your friends, now can be done entirely digitally. We're all lonely, incredibly lonely, and struggling to find meaning in a world in which we are totally connected to one another at all times and totally alienated from one another at all times. And this has created an environment where it's harder to understand the other because you're not sitting by them on the bus or the train. You're sitting by yourself in your car. You're not engaging in a communal experience at a movie theater. You are engaging in a solitary experience, probably also looking at your phone at your house. Even things that require direct interpersonal connection, like dating, is done on apps. Now is the time of monsters, and the worst monsters of our nature are being encouraged.
I don't know if there's ever been a generation that has been as betrayed as millennials, to be honest. Like, the disparity between the world you were told you grew up in and the world that you would enter if you acted a certain type of way and were a certain type of way, and the actual world, the revelations of how the actual world exists, are totally different. And I don't think that there's any way to bridge that gap. The dissonance that I think we are all feeling on a daily basis between these daily revelations that insult and offend your sensibilities as a person are I think irreconcilable. Like, actually, like, I think that I'm watching the left right now go nuts with conspiracy theories the way the right has in the past because of the Epstein revelations. And the crazy thing is, like, so many of these are correct. Like, after 2008, nobody should have been talking to this guy. Like, our entire adult lives, I feel like we pursued a plan that was outlined for us in youth and adolescence that increasingly is not true. And because the world is bankrupt in like every sense of the word, there isn't enough money to do anything, and no one has the moral authority to justify why this system is the way that it is. And then the revelation of the Epstein files, even if, let's assume for a second that all of the things that are completely revolting, all right, are completely made up. Let's just assume, let's just grant that for a second, okay? Which, by the way, insane. But let's just assume that they are. Still, this dude was basically a power broker for people who earned their positions through chances of opportunity, privilege, and resources. So many of the people who he was interacting with are at the level of success that they're at completely arbitrarily, just randomly. They didn't earn it. They didn't work hard for it. And he's moving them around like interchangeable pieces with one another across this world. This is an echelon of people that exist purely for their own. It's like 100% exactly what Marx was talking about with the bourgeoisie. None of these people do anything that is particularly meaningful enough to justify their position. And they're not creating a better world. It's crazy making. And like, my spirit is so broken by this. Like, this is so sad. The people of Minneapolis need all of our support right now, because the flashpoint for this is this Gestapo. These people, the police, and we've always known this on the left, the police exist purely to continue the system of property ownership. And that property ownership exists. Why? It isn't to create a better world. It's to maybe do the disgusting things that people in the Epstein files were doing. I'm not sure how we can recover from this.
Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff has called for Trump's impeachment, and it's about time. As we are all well aware, Trump has done a long list of impeachable offenses, so it is about time that someone is actually calling for his impeachment. I have hundreds of thousands of followers all over the world who are incredibly confused why Trump is president and how he was even able to be elected in the first place. So I'm going to take what the senator has done as a great sign. And in the meantime, we are going to continue our massive protests here in the United States. I know that most people around the world are not seeing the coverage of the massive protests that are taking place every single weekend here in the US. But those of us who did not vote for this are doing our very best to fight back against this disgusting administration. Please go ahead and follow me on here if you don't already, and my other platform.
Today we're going to be talking about what happened to Dr. Jordan Peterson back in 2018. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist and expert in psychiatric drug side effects, specifically benzodiazepine-type injuries. And he just fell off the face of the earth because he was having, what the news called a benzodiazepine addiction problem. Now, this was far from the truth. The truth was actually much worse than this, Peterson. He didn't have like an addiction problem. He had a brain injury. is what happened. He developed something called benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction. It's a rare side effect. It's not addiction. It is not addiction at all. People look at them and they say, well, you never used to react to that before, or I've never met anyone with that sensitivity. You're crazy. You're hysterical. This is absolute bullshit, because he was taking the medication at the normal prescribed dose, wasn't abusing it in any way, and then he developed a drug injury. People use this term addiction so freely, and it can be easily understood. So, like, yes, you could say maybe he was, like, quote unquote, addicted to the medication in some way, because after he got sick, when he tried to come off of it, he couldn't, because it was so uncomfortable, because his neurons were damaged. So yeah, maybe he is addicted, but actually the more accurate term for that is he is physiologically dependent on it. And that means, like, his brain had just adapted to it, and removing it was causing withdrawal symptoms. Now, in my world, when you're actually like a clinician and you use these words with precision, addiction doesn't really mean physiological dependency. So it's really unfair, actually, to use that word, and it's inaccurate.
Because I'm not going to buy this argument that, like, these young girls were raped by what? That did they rape themselves? No, they got raped by people who are in powerful positions, and I want to know how many of those individuals are currently serving in our government in some role
Average
or the
American awake for 18 hours a day. How many minutes do you think they spend worrying about this stuff? Maybe they were raped, maybe they weren't. This is not what American families give a damn about.
Just to be clear,
they just
we
don't
do know that there were victims, so that's not speculative.
Him and his allies promised their base, we are going to deliver the Epstein client list that's going to take down all of your Democratic enemies.
Bring it.
Yeah, well, yes, bring it. Donald, please. Donald,
Nobody gives a poop.
You don't give a poop, okay? Other people do, including people like me who want justice. And I want to know how many of those people are in our government.
I don't know about
poop about this. Epstein's still dead tonight. Still dead. All the people that have been really hurt by this actually were caught lying in a scandal, including a member of the royal family who was stripped of his titles, all that.
Say that again? All the people that were really hurt?
Yeah.
The people that were really hurt are the women, Kevin.
Yeah. And I'm
the young girls.
I don't work with me on this, okay?
Okay, well, makes sense, though. Please.
No, I'm going to help you so much tonight. So at the end of the day, any of you cared about the victims, you wouldn't drag these women who are in childbearing years now, some of them having children, back into the limelight, back into the same story to expose them again to this hideous outcome, because these guys,
you don't,
and so you want to do that,
do it to somebody else.
Them.
They could be doing it to somebody else
They
right
don't
now.
want you to help them anymore. They want to.
How do you know that? What are you
I
basing
know with
that on?
certainty they'd rather
You've
live out
spoken
their
to the
lives
victims who
being
said they
brought
don't
back,
want justice
talking
brought
about
forth.
Epstein. You really think they want that now?
You're
They're
speaking
done
on
with
behalf of women, saying that you've personally spoken to victims who said they do
I
not
have
want
spoken
justice
to
pursued.
no one. I'm just being pragmatic.
So then that is a
You're dragging
irresponsible
out
statement.
women.
You have no idea what these young women
If it
want.
was you, you'd rather get on with your life? Aren't you
No,
done
if
with
it were
this?
me, I would want justice pursued. Here's who should be.
Money? What do you want?
Here's who should get on with his life.
The truth is out. There's a prisoner and there's a dead guy. That's the truth.
I think these clips from Kevin O'Leary, among many others, are so illuminating to the massive amounts of fear that the people with all the wealth are feeling right now, because what happens when people stop looking to the left and right and arguing over fabricated issues that mean nothing, and they start looking up and asking, who is pissing on my head? People don't want it for you to start saying, hey, groceries and rent and car insurance and health insurance and everything else is so expensive. Why is Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the mastermind of the sex trafficking ring that Epstein was a part of, why is she getting custom meals in prison? Why is she being allowed to play with a fucking puppy? Why is she allegedly using the warden as her personal secretary? She have her own personal reception area with snacks and drinks where she can have visitors come see her. Why is this news that broke this week happening? She, as of this week, is asking for her 20-year sentence to be commuted. Very clear when I say this. This was the mastermind of the operation, and her father is the key to every single thing we are seeing right now, Robert Maxwell and his ties to intelligence. He was a spy who worked with Russia, the United States, Great Britain, and Israel. One of the most famous spies in the history of the world, and when he died, he was given a state funeral. This man and this woman are the key to so much of this. Jeff Epstein was essentially a blow-up doll, right, to maintain relationships, to kind of, be in the boys club and get leverage on all these people. He was a tool that she used. Does not make him any less evil, but he was not an intelligent person, according to any single person that ever had a conversation with him. Elite individuals like Kevin O'Leary are so concerned about this because it is a unifier. It's something where people on the left and the right can all come together and say, look, this is not right. People like Kevin O'Leary try to pretend that they speak for victims and his buddy Donald Trump speaks for victims. Remember this, that the fucking DOJ did not redact the name of a victim by accident while redacting pretty much everything else right in the documents. They do not care about victims. Kevin O'Leary is simply a pedophile defender.
Sound wrong the moment you hear it. And this is going to be the hardest conversation about Epstein we're going to have. I'm being honest. The Epstein case was not a failure. It wasn't a failure. It was a successful containment event. And I want you to acknowledge that before we go anywhere. Because there is not a list. Because a list implies that something went undiscovered. Right? Nothing important here is undiscovered. There is girls. There were flights. There were houses, witnesses, settlements, a conviction. There was everything. And after all that, the system continued to do business with them. That's what happened. It's not even ignorance. It's literally an evaluation they conducted. And there's a sentence in all of this that you're not really supposed to say. That some crimes are tolerated because stopping them would destabilize the people who run things. That's the reality. Not because they're evil. Not because they're in a cabal. I don't even want y'all to talk like that anymore. I want you to understand they're relational inside of the system they live in. That's all they are. Relational inside of the system they live in. And that's the one sentence that's radioactive and you never get to hear it. Because the media wants you to believe that there's danger in what's hidden. Right, it isn't. There's danger in what's known and absorbed. Because once you realize that, you'll stop asking who's on the list. You'll say something much more dangerous than that. I want to hear more dangerous speech out there. What else is being allowed because it's cheaper than stopping it? That's what I want you to talk like. Because that's the one question that gets people cut off stage all the time. So let me make this more uncomfortable for you. Because I'm being honest with you. This will be the most serious conversation about Epstein we're ever going to have. The women are still here. They are. They were never the missing evidence. They were the inconvenient version of proof. Their existence should have ended everything, but the fact that it didn't means that the system already made its choice. And that choice is not about guilt. It was about cost. So the media goes even further than this, right? Because there's a sentence that they could have said by now that I'm going to say for you, okay? I'm going to say for them. If a predator is rich enough, mobile enough, and socially insulated enough, there is no reliable mechanism in modern civilization that can stop them early. That's the truth. That's the truth. I'm going to be so serious with you. I'm going to say it again. If a predator is rich enough, mobile enough, socially insulated enough, there is no reliable mechanism within the United States, within modern civilization as a whole, that can stop them early. That's what they can do with them. Settle afterward, litigate later, reframe the story, and move on. That's all they can do. And that's not a bug. This is literally the design limit of the society. Because no one at the top is panicking, but I want you to understand why. I want you to understand why. Because exposure does not threaten power. Right? It doesn't. Exposure to power is just bad weather to them. Recognition does. Recognition forces the admission that justice is conditional. And once that's admitted publicly, the story holding the system together collapses, right? But that's why the conversation is so childish, too. I want you to really get your head around this. Names, lists, speculation, drama. But if we all stayed with the adult conversation for more than 10 seconds, people might realize something irreversible. So I'm going to say the most irreversible thing that you could ever hear right now. We do not live in a system that prioritizes preventing harm. We don't. We live in a system that prioritizes surviving it. I'm going to say it slowly for you. We do not live in a system that prioritizes preventing harm. We live in a system that prioritizes surviving it. Because once you understand that, then you'll know what's exactly going on. And this is even the most controversial part. We could go even further than this. I want you to really understand. Epstein did not expose the hidden underworld. No, he exposed the upper boundary of accountability. He showed exactly how far harm can go before power says that's enough. That's all he showed. And that boundary is actually much further out than anybody can admit, than anybody even wants to admit. So when you hear somebody say, why won't they just release everything? Why won't they just come forward? Well, understand what they're really asking for. Understand what's really going on. They want reassurance that this is still just a normal scandal and a normal ending. That's what they want, but it isn't. Right? This was a systems demonstration. I want you to lock in. This was a systems demonstration, and the system passed. And that's why it feels so hard to hear. But not even because I'm being extreme. I'm not saying anything crazy. It just takes away your last comfort. Right? Your last comfort. That if something is bad enough, someone else is going to stop it. But history says otherwise every single day. Every day. And that silence around this case isn't confusion either. This is the active sense. This is an active a system of recognition management that they're conducting on us. That's all it is. That's all it is. So I just want you to understand the reality. We do not have a system that could check an Epstein-style character. That's all we have. That's all we have.
One of Donald Trump's former employees, a man by the name of Steve, who is one of the judges at Miss USA and Miss Teen USA, posted a TikTok. And this TikTok is very telling. We're going to play this, and we're just going to watch and listen to it together.
Comes to Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, the media is missing the smoking gun. Now, I've sat on this information for years, and I really didn't want to get into this because this is not in my job description, and it's very dangerous to come out with this publicly. The smoking gun is Miss USA and Miss Teen USA, the pageants which Donald Trump owned for years. Now, how do I know? Because I was one of the judges in these pageants. I trained dozens and dozens of the winners and the runners-up in public speaking to promote their platform. This is all I'm going to say about this. If you're in the media and you're looking for information, start with Billy Bush. Billy Bush hosted the Miss USA, Miss Teen USA multiple times. Nancy O'Dell is another one. And then go down the rabbit hole from there. There are people that know a lot more than those two, but start there. They're celebrities, and start there, go down the rabbit hole. And I think what you're going to find is going to be very, very upsetting. Don't call me. I'm not going to comment. I'm not going on TV and talking about this. This is very dangerous to sit on. If you decide to pursue this in the media, be very, very careful. These people are dangerous.
So that was Steve. Just to repeat, he was a judge that worked with Donald Trump at his pageants, Miss USA and Miss Teen USA. And what he said there is that the real smoking gun, as it relates to Trump and the Epstein files, is something that none of us are paying attention to because it relates to the pageants that Donald Trump owned. Now, if you are a frequent viewer of this live stream, we actually talk about those pageants significantly more than a vast majority of people in the media do. Now, you've probably heard this clip before, literally, if you've ever watched my stream. Now, if you happen to be one of the, first timers, first and foremost, thanks for being here. Second of all, we're just going to quickly play an excerpt of Donald Trump talking about what he would do at these pageants. This was a sit-down conversation that he had with Howard Stern in 2005.
To do that. So you have done that. Now, I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show. Yes. And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting. I want to make sure that everything's good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
So what you just heard was a clip of Donald Trump admitting to sexual exploitation at these pageants by using and abusing his position of power that he held at these pageants as the owner to allow himself to barge backstage into their dressing rooms unconsensually to look at their naked bodies. And on top of that, the other name that Mr. Steve, one of the judges at these beauty pageant contestants, said was Billy Bush. He said, look into Billy Bush. And if you know anything about Billy Bush, he's also a POS. In fact, you are more likely than not familiar with the Access Hollywood tapes from 2005, where Donald Trump was, unbeknownst to himself, recorded by saying that he just likes to assault women. Okay, that he likes to grab them by the P word, that he doesn't even need to ask first. And the man that he was saying that to, agreeing with him and laughing, was Billy Bush. So this is damning, all right? I think that this should raise a huge red flag in the mind of every person watching this stream. Former judge of the beauty pageant contestants is saying that the media is missing the mark. We all need to be paying more attention to these pageants. And then we have clips from these pageants of Donald Trump admitting to exploiting the women and girls inside of them. And then he's like, look into Billy Bush, the man that Donald Trump told he'd just like to assault women, grab them by their P word without asking first, quoting his own words, and then laughed it away. So I think that we all need to be paid more attention to that. That's the breaking news of the day.
So an Epstein email leak confirms that television shows like Stranger Things and the OA have been telling us for years, when trauma-based events happen, they gain psychic abilities. Say when someone dies fully flatline and they get revived and come back to life, you bring back something from the divine realm. In this email, he wrote, I am in Paris and was about to write you and it popped up. She's a classic stage 3 in the model. outlier who was intelligent, was traumatized when she was young, parentheses, SA, and now gradually coming into her own and becoming self-realized, can share our text interactions with her permission, starting to develop special abilities. This trip, we found a lot of stories like this, though she is more on the extreme side, given her biographical history. Have been working with many such people with the model with good success. So he's practicing this on other people. You see him mention it where he says, have been working with many such people with the model with good success. So he has a system in place that he's using to test on these people where he's trying to activate psych abilities. And a common way is that they send the people, they kill them, and they bring them back. And he said he was in Paris. We do know Epstein had an estate in Paris. He had a home there. There's not a lot on it.
Hello, guys. Right, I've got a good one here. So I watched an incredible podcast, which I urge all of you to watch without passing any judgment until you watch it, on The Diary of a CEO, which is obviously hosted by Stephen Bartlett, that hosted Trigonometry's Konstantin Kisin. I mean, the title of the video is "The Man Warning the West: Trump is Changing the World Behind the Scenes." The insight and the level of comprehensive understanding of what is going on based on geopolitics and everything else it combined is just fascinating to listen to, with someone like Konstantin, who is extremely well versed in these things,